morning. Welcome to the meeting of the local review body of West Lothian Council. I am Councillor Loeb, chair of this committee. The meetings are usually broadcast live over the internet on the council's YouTube channel. Webcasts and meetings have been suspended from the 16th of March until 7th of May because of the Scottish Parliament elections on the 7th of May. This meeting is therefore being webcast live. Members of the public will still have their usual statutory right to attend meetings in person, even when they're not being webcast. This recording of the meeting will be available through the Council's website soon after the 7th of May. I'm being assisted by my colleagues from Committee Services and IT. Attendees may join me in the meeting from other locations. Everything said will be in microphones are live and will be recorded. There's more information on the privacy statement about meetings arrangements on the Council's website. An agenda has been published showing the business for today's meeting. First item on the agenda is the apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies this morning from Councillors Willie Boyle and Pauline Orr, and no substitutes are allowed at this meeting. Thank you.
Order of business as of declarations of interest, anyone? No declarations. Order of business, including notice of anything, nothing. Sorry, is there any?
No information.
Yeah. Chair will invite members to identify any such reports they wish to have fully considered, which will fail and be. Confirm draft minutes of the meeting of the local review body held on Wednesday, 11th of March. And the first item on the agenda is a notice of review of the change of use from open space to private garden ground and erection of decking in retrospect at 9 Ballincreef Mill, Bathgate. Steve Lovell.
Proposal, the first being a change of use of an area defined as open space, and the second, the construction of decking to the rear of the house, which extends into that area. And as members will have seen from the site inspection this morning, the works have been implemented and the application has therefore been made retrospectively. Before going further, I need to advise members that a flood risk assessment was received late and must therefore be considered as new material. Because of this, there are procedural implications for how the review is progressed today. Also submitted very late, just 5 days ago, is a supporting statement from the appellant, accompanied by a collection of photographs, which sets out to elaborate on matters which were apparently identified in their ecology survey. But that ecology survey is one which the Council has not received. Members will recall from previous cases that planning law restricts the ability of parties to introduce new material at this review stage, and it's made clear that the focus of our review should be on the material which was before the officer who dealt with the application under the scheme of delegation, unless it can be demonstrated that the new material could not have been raised before that time, or that it not being raised before that time is a consequence of exceptional circumstances. None of these new matters satisfy these requirements, and that being the case, the LRB could decline to have regard to it. The LRB does, however, have the discretion to decide whether new information presented with the notice of review is sufficiently material so as to be taken into account, accepting or rejecting it before reviewing the appointed person's decision, and the Chair may therefore wish to seek the views of members before we go further. Should members be minded to allow the new material to be taken into account, then it would be procedurally necessary to adjourn the review of this case today in order that a procedure notice can be issued by Committee Services. That would invite comment from the flood management team on the conclusions of the flood risk assessment, but the opportunity could also be taken to invite the appellant to table their ecology survey and to similarly invite comment on this from the Council's ecology and biodiversity team. It would be anticipated that any adjournment should be for perhaps 2 cycles in order that the procedure notice can be issued and to allow sufficient time for comments to be submitted. When the review came to be reported back to the LRB, all of the relevant documentation could then be comprehensively presented to the members at that time. Yeah.
Thank you. Does the members wish to accept new information and place the meeting, adjourn the meeting to a further date, or do you want to just carry on as is? Councillor Tony Boyle. I think we'll continue, so I'll second Councillor Boyle on that one. Oh, sorry, I propose that we carry on. We continue the case as is. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Tom Collins.
Chair, I'll second that proposal. I think it's best that we do have all the information that we in front of us.
No, it's not.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Come out with a counter.
All right. No. Sorry, I misunderstood. Well, I'll withdraw them.
So
Continue hearing. Continue it to the June.
I was going to continue the meeting today. However, I don't have a seconder. I wish to continue the meeting. I don't want to. Yes, I don't want to accept the further information. They had the opportunity and they haven't tabled it. But that's what I want to do. I want to proceed. Yeah, that's fine.
Maureen, would you want to come in about that?
Yeah, as the planning officer outlined, it is open to members to accept new information if they feel it is a material consideration. In the circumstances, as I understand it in this case, the new information relates to a flood risk assessment which was submitted late, and also information on ecology, which would suggest that an ecology report is in circulation to, if members don't wish to proceed to review that documentation, take it into account. It's open to them in terms of the legislation, but we should always be mindful of taking into account material considerations when we're determining matters. However, it may be that the councillors feel that they have enough information in front of them to take that decision today.
Okay. Want to carry on, Steve?
So the application site is within the established residential development on the western edge of Bathgate, north of Balmy Road, and it comprises a 4-bedroom semi-detached house with a very large rear garden that backs directly onto the Bathgate Water. Bathgate Water defines the settlement boundary at this part of Bathgate and is at the same time the southern boundary of the adjoining special landscape area which lies to the north of Bathgate. The retrospective works comprise an external timber frame, a composite clad decked area measuring some 6.9 metres in width and 3.6 metres in length, which extends over the southern sloping embankment of the Bathgate Water by approximately 1.35 metres, and with the overhang being carried on metal supports set into the embankment. The decked area is enclosed by a 1.1 metre high glass balustrade on 3 sides and a 1.8 metre high screen on the remaining side. Set out in the report of handling, the appointed person concluded that the proposal was at risk of being affected by flooding and was therefore contrary to NPF 4 Policy 22 flood risk and the equivalent LDP policy EMG 2 flooding. Additionally, the Council's planning guidance, supplementary guidance on flooding and drainage is also referenced as policy which doesn't support the proposal. The proposal was also held to be inconsistent with NPF 4 Policy 3 biodiversity and LDP policy ENV 11 protection of the water environment, coastline and riparian corridors, on account of the unknown ecological impact on the riverside embankment in the absence of there being any ecological report advising of any loss of habitat having been provided. Furthermore, the works were held to have failed to identify any specific locational need, and they were at the same time considered to be visually unsympathetic, potentially detrimental to the water environment, thereby being contrary to NPF 4 Policy 14, Design Quality in Place, and LDP Policy DS1, Design Principles, and ENV 21, Protection of Formal and Informal Open Space. 3 consultations were undertaken, the first with the Council's Ecology and Biodiversity team. It objected to the proposal due to there being no supporting ecology report, a report which would have served to identify any affected protected species. Concerns were also raised because the works physically encroach on the riverbank and are not compliant with the Local Biodiversity Action Plan which recommends that a 10-metre wide buffer or standoff should ordinarily be observed. SEPA did not object to the proposal, but they advised that the structure would not impede the flow of the river or cause a reduction in available flood capacity. The third consultation response was from the Council's in-house flood management team. And while confirming that the site was within an area identified as being at risk from low to medium flooding, it had no evidence to suggest that this particular property was affected. Noting SEPA's detailed response, however, it suggested that a proportionate flood risk assessment would be in order to assess whether the decking had any impact on the Bathgate Waters floodplain and on an existing culvert at Chapman's Brae, which is further downstream. There were no representations from neighbours or other third parties. So turning now to the notice of review, the document submitted by the appellant and which sets out their arguments as to why the appointed person's decision to refuse planning permission should be overturned. And it's been included with the papers which have been circulated today. But very briefly, the appellant argues that the proposal represents an appropriate form of development and is compliant with relevant planning policies. The appellant specifically contests the justification for a flood risk assessment due to the allegedly modest nature of the works and argues that such a requirement is disproportionate. The appellant does nevertheless advise that a flood risk assessment has been commissioned to support the notice of review, but it's important for the library to be aware that this document was not submitted until the 14th of April. That was some 11 weeks after the notice of review was registered. The appellant also disputes that the works have involved significant vegetation removal or have disturbed the ecology of the site, but advises that an ecological impact assessment has been commissioned post-refusal to support this review. Unlike the flood risk assessment, this has not, however, materialised. No such assessment has been received. The appellant goes on to suggest that works to remove the structure would be more disruptive, potentially more harmful. And finally, the appellant addresses the question of locational need for the decked area as simply being to improve the beneficial enjoyment of their house. The local review body must determine the review in accordance with the development plan unless it concludes that material considerations indicate otherwise. Having regard to the provisions of the development plan, the main issues in this appeal can be summarised as residential amenity, landscape and visual impacts, flooding risk, and impact on ecology, biodiversity and the aquatic environment. Section D of the covering report sets out the relevant development plan policies, supplementary guidance and planning guidance in play. It's also relevant in this particular case for members to be aware of some recent planning history in the vicinity of the application site, and that also may be considered a material consideration. Number 13 Ballincreef Mill and number 15 Ballincreef Mill, closely neighbouring houses located to the west of the review site, both had retrospective planning applications for similar change of use and decking structures refused in 2021. And both have had appeals against the service of enforcement notice dismissed by the DPA. Number 15 has also had an appeal to the DPA against the refusal of planning permission dismissed. Decking at numbers 11 and 25 have been confirmed by development management as lawful, while decking and a bridge at number 13 and number 15 have been removed. Happy to answer any questions.
Is there any questions? Councillor Conn.
Thanks. Steve, you mentioned about the other applications, which again were retrospective, and this is a respective planning application. So if we were to grant on the basis of it being retrospective, is that not contrary to what already has been determined by the reporter? So we're actually acting contrary to previous decisions of a similar nature elsewhere.
That would be correct. However, we have to determine planning applications on their individual merits. So I think that would be the first protocol. We need to look at the specifics of this situation. Although it's useful to be aware of what's been happening round about.
Equally in that same vein, SEPA have made it clear that if we grant retrospective permission, they cannot authorise any engineering structures. So basically, CEPA would then have no locus on what has been constructed at the burn side. So are we, by granting, taking that opportunity for CEPA to actually make any further comment or ask for any removal of the structure if they find that it is affecting the water?
I think the council has to take its planning decisions on its planning merits and leave other actions by other parties such as CEPA for them to progress that themselves under their own powers. I don't think we should conflate the two things together.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? I'm just going to ask the structure underneath. We couldn't really review it as such, instead of leaning over. Is it metal? Is it metal struts? Is it metal? Is it metal? Yeah. It looks more solid than the other ones, I have to admit. It looks a better build than all the other ones, actually. By a country, well, by a considerable degree. I thought some of the other ones were kind of very suspended in midair.
The drawings suggest that the posts which support this are sunk into the ground by about 700 centimetres, almost a metre deep. They've been concreted in, so it's a fairly robust structure.
Yeah, thank you. Any comments? Comments? Does anybody like to move a position? After looking at it, I'm in two minds to the view on it. In some ways, it looks like it's a better structure than what's there. However, it's most of the paperwork had not been assessed, and I don't think the paperwork would have showed anything other than what CEPA had showed for the water report. For what I could see, there was nothing there that was going to cause a flood risk as such. It wouldn't have made any difference between flooding there. If it was a flood, it would have been the same no matter what had happened if it came up to the ground level. I don't think it would have changed. Having had a house similar to that in the past. Yeah. I would take the position of the appointed person. Refuse uphold the position of the appointed person and refuse the application. Have a second?
Chair, I would agree that we do not uphold the appeal for the reasons set out in the paper.
Any alternative positions? Thank you.
Chair, so that's unanimous across committee that the application for review has been refused and therefore planning permission is refused. Thank you.
Item number 6 is a change of use from flat to short-term let. It's 136 Hot Grey. Margaret Stone.
Thank you, Chair. This review relates to a proposed change of use from residential flat to short-term let at 136 Hawkbury, Elyburn, Livingston. The property is a ground floor property in a block of flats set over 4 stories. Communal facilities include landscape, grounds, bin store and parking, with one space allocated for the flat. No physical alterations are proposed for the building, only the change of use is being considered as a part of the planning application. The property would operate as a short-term let on a year-round basis, accommodating between 1 and 4 guests per booking, with stays ranging from 1 to 28 days. The property would be let to a single group at any one time, with typical check-in and check-out times of 4 p.m. and 11 a.m. respectively. Cleaning would be undertaken between guest stays by a professional contractor. The application was refused on the following reasons. The proposed operation of the short-term let facility will have a detrimental impact on local immunity and would significantly impact permanent residents as a consequence, in particular of noise and disturbance are travelling across shared areas within the building. Council has declared a housing emergency due to the lack of affordable housing and high number of homelessness across West Lothian. Therefore, retaining housing stock is crucial to assisting to resolve these matters. The local economic benefits of this short-term let facility are not sufficient to outweigh the overall impact of the loss of the property as a permanent home. Therefore, the proposal is deemed contrary to policies 14, design, quality and place, and 30, tourism of MPF4. And policies DES1, design principles, and EMP7, tourism of the West Lothian Local Development Plan. No representations were received. Statutory consultees, transportation and environmental health were consulted. Neither objected. However, environmental health have advised a short-term let licence would be required. The appellant's response can be found in the notice of review. The appellant's main points can be summarised as follows. The decision placed disproportionate weight on the potential amenity impacts which are not supported by evidence. The applicant has experience of operating other short-term let properties without complaints. Compatible permissions have been granted nearby platted developments with shared access arrangements. The loss of a single residential unit will not materially impact housing supply. There's a demonstrable demand for the property as a short-term accommodation. It should be noted, members are able to exercise planning judgment and therefore do not require to evidence judgment. 8 and 9 Kestrel Bray were granted planning permission prior to the declaration of the housing emergency and differ in that they are first floor properties within a terrace building with private main door access. No specific address are being provided for the examples at Queen's Crescent and Waverley Crescent. However, a recent comparable application within a flatted development was refused for the same reasons. 2 temporary permissions granted prior to the housing emergency are due to expire this year. Turning to the determination of the application, the local review body must determine the application in accordance with the development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. Relevant policies are 14, design, and 30, tourism of MPF4, and policies DES1, design, and EMP7, tourism of the West Lothian LDP. MPF4 policy 30 states development proposals for the reuse of existing buildings for short-term letting will not be supported where the proposal will result in the loss of residential accommodation, where such loss is not outweighed by demonstrable local economic benefits. The Council's declared housing emergency is a material consideration. Members should consider how much weight they apply to this matter. In short, the main issues to consider are 1, if the proposal will result in an unacceptable impact on local amenity or on the character of the neighbourhood, and 2, whether the loss of the residential accommodation is justified in this instance. If members are minded to allow the review, then the draft conditions in the paper should be applied. This includes a standard condition requiring the development to commence within 3 years of the decision notice. I'm happy to answer any questions, Chair.
Any questions? Any comments? No. I'd like to move a position. Due to the housing emergency, this proposal was contrary to NPF guidelines, and this NPF F4 policies 14, designs quality in place, and tourism 30, and WLLDP 2018 policies DES 1, design and principle, and policies EMP 7 tourism is recommended, and I recommend it is refused. A seconder.
I'll second that, Chair.
Any alternatives? We'll move on to the last piece is item 7, notice of review of application of alteration extension to conversion of garage to former house at 8 Melbourne Road, Broxburn, West Lothian. Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. This review relates to the refusal of planning permission for the alteration, extension and conversion of a garage to former house at 8 Melbourne Road, Broxburn. The site is a 1.5-storey outbuilding that was last used as a garage and workshop to the southwest of the property at 8 Melbourne Road and is set back from the road. The appellant proposes conversion of the garage with a dormer window and roof lights, as well as replacing existing garage doors with new doors and a window. A small area of amenity space and 2 parking spaces are proposed in front of the proposed house. The appointed officer's view is the site is constrained in size and would provide insufficient space for a house to include suitable private amenity space. A house in this location would not reflect the pattern of development in the area or the street scene. Proposal is out of keeping with actual local context of the area and would result in overdevelopment of the site, and it's overall concluded that the proposal would be detrimental to the character of the area. Consequently, the appointed officer found the proposal contrary to LDP policies DES 1, design, HOU3 infill housing within settlements, Council's residential development guide, as well as NPF 4 policies 14 on design and 16 on quality homes. It should be noted that Environmental Health lodged a holding objection to the application seeking further information on the type of heating system to be used for the proposed house. No other consultees objected to the application. In summary, the appellant states the following in response. Property is of a sufficient size to accommodate the plot is of a sufficient size to accommodate an additional house. It is noted that 2 to 6 Melbourne Road only enjoy a small area of amenity space to the front of houses facing the road, with a passage to the rear. The garage already forms part of the spatial pattern and character of the area. The proposal seeks to renovate, change the use of, and significantly improve the existing building. Proposal complies with NPF 4 policies 14 and 16, will improve the quality of the area, is consistent with the LDP strategy, and is for small-scale development in a residential area. In addition, the proposal complies with NPF 4 policy 9 on brownfield and vacant and derelict land through converting a derelict and unused building. The view of the appellant is the proposal complies with LDP policies. There's 1 in HOU3. The proposal has been designed to be in keeping with the character of the area, and the property benefits from good accessibility by public transport and active travel to surrounding facilities. The proposal will also help to address the housing emergency by providing 1 extra dwelling, and in response to environmental health, electric underfloor heating will be installed as the means of heating, with a small number of roof-mounted solar panels installed as well. The appellant's full statement is available in the papers. 1 objection was received from a neighbour to the planning application. In summary, this objection raised 1 material point, which was around lack of provision or space for bins within the property. The objection also makes points around land ownership, which are non-material and cannot be considered in determining this review. Local review body must determine the review in accordance with the development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. Relevant development plan policies and supplementary guidance are noted on page 2 at section D of the covering report. Main issues for LRB to consider are the principle of housing on the site, design of the proposal, and the impact on the character of the surrounding area. Members are minded to allow a review, then draft conditions and an informative in the papers should be applied. Delegation of the case to officers will be required to secure developer contributions through a Section 75 agreement. For clarity, relevant contributions are towards education, being Roman Catholic Secondary at £2,510, and St Nicholas Primary at £1,153, as well as cemeteries at £88, indexed from Q4 of 2017. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Do you have any questions? Could we have a comment?
On the site visit, I don't think that was the only one that thought about it. It was commented that what's proposed to go in here certainly look better than what's there at the moment. But that's not really a consideration when we look at the report. So I'm inclined to, and there's still in comments, I would be inclined to refuse it for the reasons given by the officer in the report.
Any other comments? Initially, when I first seen it, the site, I thought it looked very shabby, and I thought the design of the house was a lot better. However, it's constrained to where it is, and there's a number of issues that would come up later when it was built. And I would probably ask for someone to move a position on this one. Councillor Tony Boyle.
I'll move it. Okay, thanks, Chair. I am going to say that I am refusing the appeal, and I am supporting the officer's recommendations as given in the reasons given in the report, which are NPF 4 Policy 14 Design, West Lothian Local Development Plan DES 1, HOU 3, and Policy 16 of NPF 4. For those reasons, I would refuse the application for the appeal.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor Conn.
I would second the refusal, Chair.
Any other alternative? So the officer's recommendation there.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just to confirm, the application for review has been refused and therefore planning permission is refused. Thank you.
I'd like to thank everybody for attendance at the meeting, and thank you very much.